There are certain key relationships that are more challenging to imagine. Okay, so use this word audiate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think that the term is a little confusing. I know what it means. I understand what they're trying to say by it. But no one is actually literally hearing all of the notes sounding. Nobody's hearing that
Mm-hmm.
in their head when you say audiate a melody or audiate the chords. Nobody is hearing all of the notes simultaneously. That's not how our brain works, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can imagine what it sounds like, and imagining what something sounds like is sort of like when you hear it, you're not surprised. It's more that than it is like, well, I was already, my vocal cords, my eardrums were already vibrating at that, at that, at that frequency. So see, right, because sound is what goes in your ears, and we need ears, to hear. You can't just hear with your brain, right? That's not. It's just not. That's not the way we work. That's not the way our brain works.
Mm-hmm.
So imagining what something sounds like is more like when you hear it, you're not surprised by it. You knew it anyway. Like you were hearing it. Like, but um, it's less like there's something physical taking place. And I think that the term audiate sort of can make you think that that's what is being said. So then, if you never develop the ability to literally hear something before, before it sounds, then you might think that, oh man, maybe I just don't have the skills, or I just don't have the genes to, to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And it's not that at all. It's just from repetition, from hearing music, from knowing music, from hearing how things interact, especially with respect to voice leading, you can start to imagine what it is that something is going to work, what something is going to sound like, which will be confirmed when you hear it. Sometimes it's not confirmed when you hear it, right? Mm-hmm. So then that's that feedback where you're like, okay, well, what was I thinking about, or how was I thinking about this that wasn't corresponding to the way that it actually sounds?
Yeah.
And then you can start to sort of deconstruct and try to figure that out. But like I was saying, there are certain key relationships that are more challenging to imagine than others. Often mediant relationships are challenging to imagine. Relationships based on thirds. Now it seems like thirds would be easy to hear, but if I'm going from G major to B major, okay, and I'm not saying walking up the same scale. I'm not saying G over B.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying in an inverted form of the same chord.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking. Not what I'm talking about. I'm saying G major to B major, where now we're in a different key. Hearing those key relationships, and okay, now how do I sort of how do I get from this one to that next one smoothly? How can I imagine what that what that sounds like, so that when I hear that chord, it's not just totally jarring and catches you totally off guard. Like, what can you do to set that up? Obviously, there's also just the issue of just being able to play in certain keys. That is an issue. So there's keys that you don't play in as often. the way to fix that is by playing in those keys more,
Yeah.
right? And by practicing scales, arpeggios, and whatnot in those keys more often. But um, but it could be two keys that are not particularly, um, uh, you know, challenging keys or whatever, or uncommon keys like E flat and G. You know, E flat is not that big a deal. G is not that big a deal. But when you put them together, E flat and then now I'm going to G, it's like, it can, So there's certain relationships. Um, Once you figure out what they are that are challenging for you to hear, then you can start developing some exercises to address that. One thing you can do with like practicing 2-5-1s, you don't have to just practice them in half steps and circle of fourths. Obviously, those are two of the more important ways to practice them, because chord changes tend to move in circles, a circle of fourths, and practicing something in half step is a way to shorten the distance between success. You know, so those are good reasons to practice those ways. But you could also practice them up in major thirds, or up down in minor thirds, or you know, um, up a whole step and then up a half step, then up a whole step and up a half step, like a diminished scale or something. You can practice them different ways. You can devise a structure that will get you to all of the keys by going, for instance, minor third, minor third, minor third, half step, minor third, minor third, minor third, half step, minor third, minor third, minor. That's all the notes, right? You can just do the same thing with major thirds. So there's different ways to practice those exercises. You can do that with your scales.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, I'm going to practice all of my major scales, full range, but instead of just practicing them in half steps or circle fourths, I'm going to practice them up in major thirds, or up in minor thirds. Whatever it is. And that'll cause you to have to sort of calculate a little and get you used to imagining and hearing what the notes are supposed to sound like.